This is an audio guide to embedding quotes to go along with the embedding quotes visual quick guide. Embedding quotes is one of the most complicated skills that you are going to have to learn in high school, and it takes a lot of practice. But I've just tried to break it down into a couple steps, and hopefully that will help you just know what it takes in order to embed correctly. But practice makes perfect. So don't be frustrated if the skill takes you some time to be able to develop easily. Okay, so the three steps I came up with in order to embed quotes are right here. So step one is identify the parts of the quote you truly need to include for your analysis. So you might have several sentences in your quote, but maybe you don't need every sentence. Maybe you just need part of a sentence or one of those sentences. It depends on the device you're analyzing. So for instance, if you're analyzing a simile or a hyperbole, you probably just need to include the part of the quote that actually has the simile or the hyperbole in it. Once you've identified what part of the quote you actually need to include, you will have to be able to paraphrase whatever else is sort of happening in the scene in your own words, just so the quote makes sense to the reader and it doesn't just seem to be coming out of nowhere. So you're basically paraphrasing or summarizing the other parts of the quote in your own words. And lastly, and maybe the most complicated part of embedding, is the use of brackets. So bracket is the symbol here. And you have to use brackets so that the quote and your own words flow together seamlessly. And since you are writing in third person and present tense, you might have to change parts of the quote so that the quote is in third person and present tense. And you also might need to eliminate like awkward capital letters if there's just kind of a random capital letter somewhere. Another thing you can use brackets for is using ellipses. So an ellipses is a ... So if you just have unnecessary parts of the quote that you kind of want to eliminate, you can put an ellipses in brackets, and that's one way to just get rid of unneeded material. Okay, so here's my example. This is the same example I used for the analysis. Okay, so in this case, I have two devices. I have allusion and idiom. So the only parts of the quote I really need are the parts of the quote that have the allusion and the idiom in them. So the allusion is here. Maybe you just better go along and roll your hoop. And the idiom is here. Maybe you better just scatter along. All right, so remember this is a reference to a child's toy. And this is just kind of like an expression, like it just means move along or go away, basically. Okay, so since I'm only quoting those two parts of the whole quote, then I'm going to need to use some of my own words in order to connect the sentence of context that I already wrote and the quote itself. So I already wrote this one sentence of context. Crooks, Lenny, and Candy are sitting around talking in Crooks's room while most of the men are out at a bar when Curly's wife suddenly enters the room. So I had already written that. And then I need to connect that to maybe you just better go along and roll your hoop, and maybe you better just scatter along. So I need to know who's saying that and why they're saying it. So what I added was Curly's wife tries to join their conversation about buying their own little farm, but Candy becomes aggravated and tries to get her to leave, telling her that, and then the quote. So that added the needed information of who was speaking and why they were saying what they were saying. Now, lastly, I need to get rid of the second person pronouns, which are you and your. And I need to get rid of this kind of weird capital letter. So normally we wouldn't have a capital maybe in the middle of a sentence. And this is already in present tense, so I don't have to worry about that. So you can just see here, that's what I did. I changed the capital maybe up here to a lowercase maybe, and then I changed you to she, and your to her, and the other you to she again. So you'd have to do the same thing if there was first person pronouns like I, me, or my. You would have to change that to third person pronouns like he and she. So just be on the lookout for that. Okay, so now you are going to practice doing that with your own quote for your first body paragraph. So go ahead and do that in the space provided on the worksheet.